Hello friends, Ben Ochart here. Thank you so much for tuning in. And today I want to talk with you about one of my favorite subjects, which is aquarium filtration. And in particular, some tips, some tricks, and also some misconceptions and lies about filtration that I learned along the way and that might help you to just do a better job at filtering your aquarium. So let's go ahead and get right into it. If you end up liking the content of this video, consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell, and that will encourage YouTube to promote the channel to other fish keepers like you and me. I appreciate you for doing that. Thank you. So let's start off with the idea of more is better. I hear this floating around, in particular when it comes to beneficial bacteria. I hear folks putting lots of filters, 4, 5, or 6 canister filters on a 125-gallon aquarium, 3 hang-on back filters and 2 big sponge filters in a 60-gallon. So let's make one thing real clear. You're only going to have as much beneficial bacteria as your aquarium can provide nutrition for. In other words, your fish and the way you feed your fish is going to be providing ammonia, and that ammonia amount is going to feed and help nourish a certain amount of beneficial bacteria. And if you spread it out over 1 sponge filter and a big substrate like I have, a very tall substrate, a lot of substrate, or you do it across 6 canister filters and 2 hang-on back filters, you're going to end up with the same amount of beneficial bacteria. So more is not necessarily better. What you should be considering is how heavily is your aquarium stocked, and how much water turnover do you want. In other words, if you have a 100-gallon aquarium and you want 10 times an hour because it's very heavily stocked, so you're going to want 1,000 gallon per hour of water circulating through your filtration, whether that filtration is in canisters or sumps or however. So water turnover, how many times that water is passing through the media, the sponges, the beneficial bacteria media like ceramics, biohome, even sponges really when you think about it, which most people consider mechanical media, but I consider it also beneficial bacteria media. So more is not necessarily better. You really have to dial it in with regards to how much turnover you want, and that should be guided by both your stocking level and really the feeding levels and how often you do maintenance. If you're a little spread out in your maintenance, you may want to have a little extra filtration. But the only place where I would say more is better is that you should have redundancy. And by that what I mean is any aquarium really from about 60 gallons on up, in my opinion, should have more than 1 filter. In the event that 1 filter fails or that you're servicing 1 filter, the other filter is undisturbed and continues to run smoothly and has an abundance of beneficial bacteria in it. So this gives you benefits, and so backup and redundancy. I think you look at the airline industry, most of the commercial jets, right? They have systems that kick in. If one system fails, another system kicks in. So they have redundancy backups, right? And so in your aquarium, you should have some type of redundancy when it comes to filtration. So in that case, more would be better, but more just for the sake of, let me have 20 filters on this 100-gallon aquarium, that starts to tip over into just being unnecessary and just a waste of energy, really. The other thing that I hear in the area of more is better is stuffing filters with a lot of media. And there as well, you need to find a balance, because if you stuff it too tight, put too much in there, you're actually going to be doing two things. One is you're going to be inhibiting flow, and two, you're going to be setting it up so that it clogs quickly, frequently, and you're going to be having to mess with it and service it more frequently, which always creates the possible risk of killing off too much bacteria or shocking the aquarium. So the less you mess with filters, the better. And one way to do that is to stuff an adequate amount of media into a filter, but not too much. If you put too much, for example, in a canister filter, where the baskets in the canister filter don't fit perfectly, where they sort of snap in place on top of each other, comfortably, not being forced down by the weight of the basket on top of it, but where they just are comfortably, the lid goes on and they fit in place and they all fit on top of each other perfectly. If that's not happening in your canister, you're going to end up with a noisy canister. It's going to rattle and it's going to drive you crazy. So more is not better necessarily. The proper amount is really the better amount. Let's talk a little bit about why I love and why I hate certain kinds of filters. And I'll just go over them one at a time with you, and I want you to share your thoughts on this subject below. And we'll start with hang-on back filters. I love hang-on back filters. One, because they're very easy to maintain. They're pretty much, depending on your stand and the size of the aquarium, they're pretty much at eye level or at shoulder level or at chest level, and they're easy to work on. You just pop them open, unplug them, pop them open, and it's all right there. Very easy to work on. What's the downside with hang-on back filters? A downside is that they can hold some media, but not as much media as other options, which I'll cover with you in a second. But some hold more media than others, and I understand that. But another advantage of hang-on back filters is that they can pull water from low in the aquarium, where there might be less oxygen, let's say, and pull it up through the intake tube, and then return it to the aquarium and break up surface tension when they do that, and that oxygenates the water. So you're creating good water circulation throughout the aquarium, moving water that is lower in the aquarium and moving it to the top. So you're sort of creating a sort of circular movement of water, which is great for oxygenation of the aquarium. So in my case, I like to run a hang-on back filter with one other filter, either another hang-on back or maybe an internal sponge, like the Powerhead type sponge filters I have, and or even with a canister, so just in combination, and that way I can alternate servicing of the filters. You never want to service all your filters at once, because you'll increase the likelihood of creating a disruption in the balance of the aquarium and possibly create an ammonia spike, which can be very stressful, if not deadly, on the fish. So hang-on back filters, I think they're great. They can be a little noisy if the return of the water is cascading down too far. Depending on how the hang-on back filter is designed, you will have some splashing noises, and some people don't like that. Even when you raise the water level of the tank, you can still get that maybe too much noise, and but some people don't like that. Some people actually like it. They like the sound of that water movement. So just things to think about when you're considering a hang-on back filter. Let's talk a little bit about canisters. I love canisters for a variety of reasons. One, they turn over because they have bigger pumps, right? They can turn over more water than a hang-on back filter. So an aquarium that needs a lot of turnover, a canister would be a better option, or a canister hang-on back combination. I like canisters because they can hold a tremendous amount of media. I don't think there's a hang-on back filter out there that can hold as much media as an average size canister. One thing I don't like about canisters is that they can be noisy. I do have a video, and I'll put a link up here on it on how to actually address a noisy canister, because usually it's noisy for a fixable reason, and but sometimes they can develop a rattle that'll drive you crazy, a hum or a rattle, and it can be difficult for you to detect what's causing it and correct it, and it can drive you crazy. So I have found that it usually is fixable. There's something going on with the impeller, or the baskets are not seated correctly, or it's not on a foam base that can dampen the noise. It's just sitting on wood or on the floor. So it can be fixed, but they can be noisy. One thing I also don't like about them is that normally the outputs are under the water, even though you can position them and point them so that they break up the surface tension. They do pull water from deep in the tank. They do have a an intake that is usually pretty low, and so it'll pull water from deep in the tank, and so it will give you that water turnover that you'll get from a canister. I'm sorry, from a hang-on back. But you do have to work with the outputs so that they are pointed in a direction that they break up the surface. And if you don't have that going on, then you have to rely on a hang-on back filter doing it, or perhaps a bubbler. But you do want that surface being broken up, right, so that oxygen gets in and bad gas escapes. Let's talk a little bit about why I love sumps. Sumps, as you know, if you look at the playlists on my channel, I consider Sumps sort of the king of filters. If you look at the folks with the very expensive high-end marine aquariums, $10,000 in coral and fish, inevitably they'll have a sump system on there, and there's a variety of reasons for that. One of them, of course, and the most obvious, is the pump that you can get in a sump. For example, this aquarium here has a sump with a pump rated at 2,500 gallons per hour. It's a Cichlids made in Italy, an Italian-made pump that's rated at 2,500 gallons per hour. That's a lot of turnover, and it's going to be, I don't know if there is a canister, certainly not a hang-on back, that will give you that kind of water turnover. So that water is going into the tank, dropping back down to the sump, circulating through that media, sponges and bio media and whatever you have in there, and then coming back to the tank, and that's a lot of water movement. And so you're really filtering, you're really pulling particles out of that water, and you're running a lot of water and oxygen over your beneficial bacteria. So that's going to really be conducive to having a very healthy, abundant, colony of bacteria, because it needs oxygen and water movement. At least your aerobic bacteria does, right? So sumps are great because they add water volume, and we know that the solution to pollution, right, very often is dilution. And so instead of having a 20 parts per million nitrate, you have 15 parts per million nitrate, because the extra water volume in the sump is helping to dilute down the parts per million. And so it's helping you to maintain a cleaner, healthier environment for the fish. I also love sumps because they're very easy to work on. Once you have them dialed in and they're running, you just leave them alone. A lot like canisters. One of the reasons I love canisters, you set them up correctly, snap them shut, plug them in, and forget about them for about 3 or 4 months. I mean, they just run and run and run and run. And I like that. I like not having to worry every week about the maintaining of a filter. With sumps, you set them up, and They run for a very, very long time before, like, I think most people will tear down a sump and do a thorough cleaning perhaps once a year. Now, in my case, I have what are called filter socks. And filter socks, I replace those usually twice a week because they're the initial sort of sump pre-filter. I love sumps because of the water capacity, the media capacity, sponge capacity, the massive amount of water turnover, and the extra water volume. They can be a little noisy. And if you don't understand them and don't set them up right, you can potentially create some problems, you know, some flooding or leaks or things of this nature. But if set up correctly, the likelihood of that happening is almost impossible. You're more likely to get a leak with a canister than you are with a sump once it's set up correctly. This is why I have a water sensor set up with my canister filter, but I don't have it with the sump, because the sump, I can turn all the systems off and it'll fill up to about the top of the tank. It will not flood. It's almost impossible to flood, especially with the one-way valves that I have to prevent back siphoning. What do you love? What do you hate about canisters, about hang-on back filters, about sumps, even about sponge filters? Are there some things that you love and hate about those filters? Share it below in the comments. And any tips, any tricks, any ideas, any misconceptions out there, let me know. I mean, there's so many of them out there. You know, sumps flood. No, they don't flood, not if you set them up correctly. Canisters are noisy. No, they're not, if you set them up right. And hang-on back filters, you know, I don't know, they don't really get a bad rap, really. I haven't heard too much of a bad rap. People have preferences between them, and people rag on me sometimes. Because I have Marineland Emperor 400s. I like them. They run and run and run like Energizer bunnies. I don't have problems with them. So I haven't found a need to get something else. But there's a lot of good ones out there, solid, that run forever. So share your thoughts below. We all learn from each other around here. I look forward to seeing you on Saturday at the Cichlids and Coffee live stream. It's at 11 a.m. Central. That's 9 a.m. Pacific or noon Eastern. We get into a lot of good topics there. And if you'd like to support the channel, consider becoming a Patreon member. Join the Garage Gang, and just click on the Patreon logo at the bottom right of the channel banner, and it'll take you to my Patreon page, and you can watch a video there that talks about being a Patreon. All right? Thank you, my friends. You are appreciated, and I'll see you next time.